Okay, and we're live. I'll try to get some links posted here. Once again, this is W2NDG with the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. This is, well, let's pause if there's any emergency traffic or communications first. If you have an emergency, please come now. Okay, always good when there's no emergencies. This is W2NDG, Neil, with the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We meet here every Sunday at 8 p.m., usually myself, accompanied by my sidekick, Jim, K2BHM. Jim has been taking a well-deserved rest in an undisclosed location. Jim is vacationing, and we wish him well. I hope he gets a chance to at least watch these. I know he's been able to check into our Zoom meetings that we had, but it's possible that he just has a lot of difficulty streaming where he is. Anyway, we've tried to have some subjects here every night that we do this. Tonight, we're just going to do an open discussion and let whoever checks in kind of drive the evening. A lot of us had, I think, pretty busy weekends outside. It was just amazing weather, if a little hot, but I won't be surprised if we don't have a huge turnout tonight, and that's fine. But if anybody has anything they've been itching to talk about, that's what we'll do tonight. If not, we'll see where the conversation leads us. So, those of you who aren't familiar with how this works is we're going to take check-ins, and usually I start with a small monologue, but I'll keep that very short tonight. So, and once again, this net is sponsored by the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club, or OMARC. You do not need to be an OMARC member to participate, but we do encourage it, and we'll give you information on where to do that when we close the net out. All right, let me drop for a moment and get composed. Composing myself tonight simply involved going to get my bottle of water, because yes, it was a hot day and I was running around doing a bunch of things. So we've covered a lot of topics so far, so you can even dig back into one of the things we've already talked about. As I mentioned, and I do have to communicate with Jim and find out exactly what his schedule is going to be as far as when he's getting back. I wanted to do a couple of nets on radio, but as a general topic, not getting into the high technical end of ham radio. I think that there's so much basic knowledge about radio itself, and depending on where you got into this hobby from, you may have skipped over a lot of it. But there's also just a lot of interesting things that some of us like to do other than DXing, talking on 2 meters, even some of the more esoteric ham activities. There are some really normal radio things that a lot of us really enjoy, things that you don't need a license to do. So we're just going to talk about the basics of radio when Jim gets back. Another drop. I know we were talking about a couple of weeks ago the things growing in your yard. I was telling you a lot about what's happening here. Things are good here. I've been really paying attention to what's coming up. The lamb's quarters that I mentioned has gotten huge and I need to start harvesting it. If it's going to be growing in the same spot every year, it's interesting. It's not necessarily something you want in your front show garden, but there's enough around it that blooms and looks amazing that I think I can leave it. Everything else that I mentioned has been growing like crazy, including the wild raspberries. And I did find a crop of common mallow under the bedroom windows along the side of the house. It's a plant sometimes nicknamed as cheeses. Let me drop. And it gets that nickname because the little fruits that come after the flowers look like tiny little wheels of cheese. You kind of have to see it to appreciate it, but they're right. That is kind of what it looks like. And mallow comes from the same family as a plant called marshmallow, which is actually where the name of the marshmallow came from, because they used to use the roots of that plant to make them. They don't anymore, but that was where marshmallows came from. So, a little interesting tidbit for you that you won't remember and doesn't matter. Anyway, as I said, everything's going well here, and I'm very happy with the way the yard looks. So, we'll take some check-ins. You check in by giving me your call sign, your first name, and your location. Please come now, and I'm going to post a live link on Facebook while you're checking in.
Control. This is K2JLV. Right now I'm mobile, but I won't be for long. Dave is silent. KDUVAH, Jim and Poughkeepsie.
All right, sorry, I was just posting a link to tonight's net. I have Dave, K2JLV, Jim, KD2VAH, and there was somebody else who tried to get in there but was unintelligible. So if there's anybody else who would like to check into the Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, please come now. Oh, there you are. The second part of that worked, Matt. I got you, though. All right, so we have Matt in Kerhunkson. And do we have anybody else who would like to check into the Sunday Night Net?
This is K9JPT. November 2 Foxtrot, Zulu Trump.
All right. Kind of a dribs and drabs check-in tonight, but that's fine. Like I said, we've all been running around doing stuff today, probably. Or the heat made us sleepy. But one way or another, I wasn't expecting a normal net night. It was an incredible looking day. So let's just pause for anybody else, and then we'll get going here. All right, so we have our check-ins, yeah, we're topic hunting basically, and we'll talk about anything anybody wants to talk about except grounding. A little joke from earlier with Jim, but I'll tell you, I had a busy day, and one of the things about becoming a homeowner again is a scientific thing that I've had to think about, and this could even be a topic, if anybody wants to go in this direction, is cooling and heating dynamics, learning how your house responds to heat and air conditioning, learning how the air flows in your house, learning whether your attic is doing what it should be doing when it's hot out, things like that. Um, Getting your heating system at full peak potential. But anyway, I spent this week without air conditioning in the house. And it wasn't that hot, really. It's going to get hotter. But I got to spend some time learning how the house responds to heat and the sun shining on it in the front in the morning and the sun shining on it in the back towards the end of the day, and learning how to deal with that. So let me drop for a second. I found that the average consumer doesn't always understand thermodynamics, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people who don't understand when you buy a roll-around air conditioner that the heat has to go somewhere. And you can't just stick one in the middle of the room and expect it to work. And also, if you stick that hose up into the ceiling in like an office space and just pump that hot air up into the space above the ceiling tiles, it may work a little bit, but it's still not going to work very well because you're not removing the heat from the general space. And I'll just say before we start rotating and finding out what people want to talk about, the best way it was explained to me years ago was when you're running an air conditioner, you're not pumping cold air into your house. You're pumping hot air out of your house. And that's the best way to look at it. So this is W2NDG on the Sunday night OMARC Science and Technology Net, and searching for a topic or commenting on a previous one. And we'll start with Dave, K2GLV. How you doing tonight, Dave?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to rest of that. And I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I have two possible topics. One which will probably not go, but you may want to consider it for a multi-part topic later on. Second topic may go somewhere in attraction. Both of them are ham radio related. Let me drop here and I will explain my topic ideas. So the first topic idea is winding balance. This probably should be a much more broader topic, including what is a balance, what is un, and different types of transformer balance, and also current balance. My specific question for the focus for this topic is one-to-one current balance. For a good design to 20-meter vertical antenna with a ground plate. Let me drop for a second to the possible topic. And the second possible topic is learning CW. I am currently engaged in trying to learn CW, and using several phone apps to learn the letters and what they sound like when they're translated to CW. And I was curious as to other people's methodologies for bridging that gulf, so to speak, learning that language. All right, that's it. I will expand on those if anybody asks. Back to you, Neil. K2G, I'll be back then.
All right, Dave. Good topics. And I definitely would want to have someone around who knows more about balance than I do. I use them, but I couldn't tell you a lot of details about them. I understand what the ratios mean as far as matching, which kind of makes sense if you do the math, like on a 9-to-1. You could say that 450 ohm balanced hookup could be then matched to a 50 ohm connection or something that is expecting a 50 ohm connection. And I know that's about as far as I get into it. So it's definitely something that I would like to learn about as well. So it's a good topic. CW, kind of a funny point with me. A lot of you know that every Wednesday night I do a class for the Long Island CW Club. If you haven't heard about LICW, they must have over 1,600 members now, maybe even more than that. It was started as a virtual CW club before COVID. They were using Zoom and doing virtual work with their members. And they have good teaching methods, but it's not just for teaching beginners. They also aim to keep people sharp and to get people to move up in speed who have plateaued at a certain point. And then there's just endless classes talking about ham radio and mostly CW, but not always related things. Like my own class, not everything I do is CW related, and partly because, and this is the funny part, I don't know CW myself. I joined that club. I started going through the beginners classes, but right now it doesn't fit into my schedule. I will get it started again because I'm building all these wonderful things that need really to be used with CW. A lot of the available projects and kits out there are CW only. Let me drop. So it's a good topic, and I'm sure there's other people on here who have learned it or are starting to or looking to, and we can talk about how we've done it or how we want to do it. I have a good idea how the LICW group teaches it, and we can go in that direction as well. So it's two good subjects, and we'll see how things move along. Jim, KD2VAH, how you doing tonight? And any ideas on things that you'd like to talk about?
You're just asking me to lie, aren't you? Actually, I like the idea of CW. I do. I like to know. I mean, you got your straight keys, your paddles, and then there's some thing called a bug I was watching tonight on a YouTube video learning about it. So yeah, I would like to. I wouldn't mind discussing that at all. I'd like to know the benefits of one, the disadvantages of the other, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I'm kind of edging toward the paddle, but then again, too, you got old timers that call you a coward. So I don't know. I like the idea of CW. I absolutely do. So I'll send it back.
All right. I have to tell you, you might find a couple of people out there who would poo-poo you for using a paddle, but not many. Not many. What you'll find people poo-pooing you for doing is using a computer and software to communicate with CW instead of learning it. There's a lot of guys with paddles, and part of it is there's only so much speed you can get out of a straight key. And there are some people out there who can do some amazing stuff with straight keys, but you really, if you want to get your speed up, you really end up having to use a paddle. So part of why we use CW, let me drop, is the nature of the type of communication. You can go around the world on half a watt with CW. Can you do that with sideband? It's possible. It's happened. There's a lot of really crazy 10-meter stories when 10 is open. And, other things that can happen. I mean, the lowest I'll go power-wise with sideband is usually 5 watts. I have a couple of rigs that do 5 watts. And when the bands were hopping years ago and I started getting into portable operating, I set up in a couple of parks on Long Island with a little 5-watt Jigu X1M rig. And I was talking to people all over Eastern Europe and South America with 5 watts and a wire in the trees. But there are limitations to the type of work you can do with low power and sideband. Let me drop. CW, because of the nature of the mode, it's a very narrow band mode. And it's a lot easier to grasp a tone at a single frequency on a very narrow frequency than it is to try to reconstruct somebody's voice in your head. And the technology behind it as well. It's a lot simpler to get a 1-watt CW signal further. And there's gadgets you can use. There's filtering. You can really, use some of the newer technology, DSP technology and such, to really hear the CW signal that you're trying to hear. But there are guys out there, including the head of LICW, who can do DX, CW, DX, and get some of these crazy distant stations with no filtering at all. Howard is one of those people that can pick a signal out of a pile of dozens and concentrate on one of them. And it amazes me. Maybe once I get good at that, I'll be able to do it too. But a lot of guys like using the filters where you can just narrow down and hear the one pitch, the one signal that you're trying to hear. So, yeah, it's a technology that lends itself very well to what we do. Let me drop. Some of the digital modes as well, but people have kind of gotten a little runaway with that. And even though FT8 was probably originally envisioned as more of a low power mode, there's guys out there, consistently running 100 watts and more. I don't recommend long key down sessions with that much power unless you have a rig that can handle it. But anyway, CW is great, and you can put together a CW rig with a minimum amount of parts and talk to people all over the place on something that you built yourself. And that's what a lot of the stuff I'm putting together does. So I need to finish my education. All right. It's another vote for CW. Matt, KB2GGF in Carhunxon. Something tells me you already know CW, but let's talk about that. Is there anything else you want to talk about tonight?
Hey Neil, Matt here, KB2GGF in Carhunxon. Pardon me, take two. A rudimentary knowledge of CW. I learned first 5 words to get my novice, and I then learned 10 and got my general, and I passed all the exams up to extra, so they gave me an advanced class, which I still hold. I've been listening to a bit of CW and, trying to copy, doing, halfway there. But I want to develop that ability. I think it's very interesting and very useful in this pursuit. I'm going to drop it. And from what I have been able to copy, you're going to hear things that you don't hear in voice. So it's variety. It's something interesting. So I would like to pursue it. When I learned it the first time, I used cassette tapes. Remember those? And they work fairly well. I think, doing all the exercises or practicing is very good for you. And I think you really got to listen to live QSOs and try and copy them. And, just lather, rinse, repeat until you got it. But you got to want to do it because it's work. But once you get there, it's fun. So that's exciting. And the alternate or future topic of balance and ununs and transformers, I would very much enjoy hearing about that. I think that would be very useful. So back to Ned.
All right, excellent. And it's kind of hard to believe that the hobby. It's been quite some time since they required code, and it's probably the thing that kept me from getting my license when I was a kid. I just didn't enjoy it. I wanted to learn it, but I just didn't have the head for it at the time. which is interesting because I've heard people tell me that, musicians, which, I was, say, amateur musician. I was definitely into music at that age. The musicians have a easier time learning CW. I don't know how true that is. I think it has to do with your sense of rhythm, and people learn it differently. And this is the way people learn language, is the way people learn everything. Everybody learns differently. And some of us learn by memorizing things, and some of us learn just by sounds, and recognizing the letters and the patterns. So it's different. I can relate a little story here. Let me drop. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I have a cousin who was part of an experiment in the school district that he grew up in, where they started to teach the kids, when they were teaching them how to read, not to assemble words from the sounds that the letters made, but to memorize the way the words looked and learn them that way. Some of the kids who were part of that program did okay. Some of them excelled because their brains worked that way. My cousin was among the people who had trouble with it because it's not how his brain worked at that age. And, we see it in very young kids. Kids who talk very early tend to pick up single words, and they'll point at something. Once they learn what that thing is, they'll point at something and they'll say bottle, or cake, or daddy, or, single words. A lot of kids that talk a little later, that don't start talking until a number of months after your single word kids, will start speaking whole phrases. They might only be 2 or 3 words strung together, but they're phrases. And once again, all of us, our brains all work differently. So what's one way of learning CW for one person may not work for another one. So if you've been frustrated in the past and had trouble learning, do a little research on it, because there's so many of these programs and apps and different ways to do it. You may find one that really fits. I know I like the way Rich and Howard started doing it with LICW. And it kind of fit the way I needed to learn. Problem was, I just wasn't able to fit the classes into my schedule at the time. They've added so many more that I think I can do it now. So I'm going to start figuring out which night I need to devote to it and spend some time practicing too. All right. Thanks, Matt. Let me drop again. Balance, transformers, ununs. Ununs are a member of the lily family and closely related to garlic and shallots, I believe. But in all seriousness, John, K9JPT, do you have a subject you would like us to consider for tonight or another night? Or do you want to comment on any of the previous subjects that have been brought up by our previous check-ins? Come now, John.
Oh, golly, Neil, you caught me off guard. I didn't hear you announce whether or not you heard my call sign along with the other guy that checked in behind me. So you caught me off guard.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I thought I echoed back, but maybe I did not. I was a little distracted here trying to get everything going. If you want, I can scoot to Tom next, and I'll come back to you.
Roger.
All right, Tom, N2FZC, commenting on any of the topics that have been brought up already, or a topic you would like to discuss. And I do have one question for you that I know it's burning on all of our regular OMARC net attendees' minds. Do any of your birds know Morse code?
You have 2 NDG in the group and 2 FCC. No, they do not. One bird talks, Sky, has
think 5 things he says. The other one's just squawk. We have a parrotlet that we're trying to teach to talk. It's fairly young. He gives kisses. We almost have him saying pretty bird, but we're not quite there yet. So no, none of them do CW. I originally learned Morse code in the Boy Scouts, and it was the visual method, did with flag stuff. And that wasn't really helpful in ham radio because CW is auditory. I did get my 5 word a minute. Didn't really progress until my son Dan was going for his license. So when he was studying Morse code, he picked up the 5 word a minute pretty quick. And I got up to the 13 word a minute for the advanced. And when he upgraded, I think, to tech or general, no, it must have been tech, to advanced. So code tapes, use code tapes, and would listen to the 18 word a minute code tapes. So then the 13 word a minute was slower, and I could get that. And then I started learning the groups. Da, did it, the. So you start picking up, the common words, and that's certainly helpful. I'm very rusty at CW now, but so like W1AW, I have to listen to like 20 words a minute, and then when they drop down to 13, I can copy. So that's the way I do Morse code. I don't know, maybe someday the bird will do some Morse code. I think I'd have to play a lot more of it. All right, W2NDG and 2FZ6.
Well, cool response. I do remember Morse code in Scouts. I was a Boy Scout, and never got my radio merit badge. I believe the way it was structured at the time, if you got your novice license, you got the badge. It's basically they kind of went hand in hand. You could get one to count for the other, or in one direction, not the other, obviously. But there were some adjustments made to it later on that would allow somebody who didn't get their ham license to get the merit badge. You could get it for shortwave listening, but I think you still had to learn Morse code. So I never did that, and I never got my ham license back then. Years later, I almost did again, but just life got in the way. And this time, I kind of regret not having learned it years ago, because I think it's harder to learn it now than it would have been then. So we had some friends in Millbrook years ago who had a bird that would imitate noises around the house more than it did voices. It did imitate a couple of voices, but it seemed to only want to imitate the angry ones. So there were certain things that the father would yell when he was upset with one of the dogs or one of the kids, and the bird learned that. And you'd go over there, and one of the first things you'd hear would be, it may have been a minor bird, because it got the tonal quality down pretty good as well. And it would go, Eric. It would just yell, just like the father. It would yell the son's name. But it made this squeaking noise, which was the noise that their corner Lazy Susan cabinet made when you tried to turn the shelves. And it would imitate the smoke alarm, which was really annoying, and a couple other household noises. It made a lot of the noises that the cat would make when it was upset. And frequently that would result in the cat getting upset again, and it was just a endless loop. So I could definitely see one of the birds learning your CQ cadence. And that could be really confusing. All right, W2NDG, and let's take a step backwards for John, K9JPT. So any of the current topics at hand you'd like to comment on, or do you have something else you'd like to suggest for tonight or another night?
Actually, the one item that caught my attention, I need to understand if I heard it correctly, was that it was mentioned that children are taught to read by how a word looks like. Did I understand that correctly?
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net with John, K9JPT. No, it was an experiment in education. I'm trying to think how old my cousin is. Probably in the late 50s. No, it would have been the mid 60s. That's right. And it was a failed experiment, John. Some people were able to learn that way, but it wasn't a good way to teach kids.
Yeah, I mean, it really blew my mind. You know, I'm a Finnish American, and everybody knows that Finland has the highest educational system in the world. Everybody knows how to read, so the country has 0% literacy. It's at 100%. Everyone knows how to read. And everybody knows how to say their ABCs. And, you know, growing up as a kid with a Finnish mom, that was the first thing that I learned, was how to say the ABCs and how to read, how to tie my shoe. But the reading thing was a big deal with her. So you had to know how to read. And hearing something like that, it kind of explains why the American educational system is so poor. I have to pay each year, I have to reach in the back of my pocket, I have to give Arlington School District $8,000. I'll never see that money again. I'll never be able to have that money again. It gives me back no benefit. And it goes to, finance these really wacko educational programs that people want to test. I mean, we should have in this country a standardized curriculum where people learn how to read the right way, students are on the same level, but you don't have any of that, and it's a real big disappointment in my opinion. This is K9JPT, back to them.
All right. Well, you know, I will give props to the school system over there. I mean, and a lot of other countries, but we're not quite as bad here always as you might think. In fact, the school district you mentioned is probably one of the better ones around here. Things are different here, and they always will be. And when you're dealing with such a diverse population, and sometimes things don't work the way you want them to, and sometimes people fall through the cracks. Does our education system need a second look? Some revamping? Yeah, probably. I won't argue that. But, you know, the idea of, you know, paying school tax, unfortunately, into a system that you might not be getting education from is educating the people who are running the municipality and the businesses and everything else that you have to deal with day to day by being a part of society here. So, part of school, let me drop, is part of what you get out of an education, I think especially here, is how much you're taught to get out of it. And that comes from early education, something that I think the schools can't always teach us. Parents need to teach their children to appreciate education, to want education, to crave education. And I think that's what ends up missing a lot of the times today. So I went to a school system that's probably not known as being one of the best in the Valley. And because of the appearance of our high school at the time, there was a certain label given to my high school and its students. Let me drop. Sometimes when you have a school that exists in the middle of a city, you only see with your eyes the part of the school that appears in front of you. And our school for many years had a very liberal policy on where the students hung out and when they were allowed to hang out and not be in the school, and what they considered to be school property, city property. And at any given time that you drove in front of my high school, there were probably about 3, 4, 5 dozen people sitting on a wall at the sidewalk of my school, smoking cigarettes, goofing around, whatever they were doing. And unfortunately, the vision of those, 30 to 40 people, sometimes more, seemed to reflect on the entire student body. But you were looking at a school that had 3,000 people, 2,500 people, pretty big school. There was a lot more going on in that building than what you saw outside of it. Another job. I guess my point is that those of us got what we wanted out of that education, as much effort as we put into getting it out. And, I was taught that I needed to learn. It's something I've mentioned. It's what drove me to want to do things like this. I like to know about things. If I see something and I don't know what it is, I want to know what it is. If something happens and I don't understand why it happened, you'll see me researching why it happened. If it's something good, I'll research how I can make it happen again. If it's something bad, I'll research how to prevent it from happening again. But this is the way I was brought up. I was brought up to crave knowledge. And a lot of, I think, what's failed on our side here is that I think maybe some younger parents aren't instilling that in their kids anymore. Things used to be better here, John, definitely. And they're not quite as bad as you might think they are, believe me. A very liberal-minded society as far as education. It's always been that way. And they tend to not like to force people to do things. I don't know how to put this so that it makes sense. But school has always been of a very liberal mind. And unfortunately, there has to be a balance there. So we need to teach our kids to crave that knowledge. And if we can do that, the schools will fix themselves, believe me. Anyway, but keep in mind, like I keep saying, it's not as bad as you think it is, especially a school system like Arlington. W2NDG on the Sunday night Science and Technology Net, where we try to teach people things here as well. Did get off on a tangent there, but John, it was a good topic and definitely something that we could debate on further. But I think we'll poke back towards some technological things. However, we're going to take some more check-ins too. So if there's anybody else who has found us, wants to check in, you can come now and check in with your call sign, your first name, and your location.
This is KD2 RFI, Bob up in Catskill.
All right, good evening, Bob. And we also have a check-in on YouTube. We have Chris, W2CRW. And Dave, K2GLV, has checked out. He might come back. So I'll throw his call sign out when we do the second rotation anyway, but Dave may have left for the evening. I'm not sure. Anyway, Bob, KD2RFI. We were kind of going around. I don't know how much you heard. We were looking for topics to talk about. We've had 3 things come up. Dave wanted to talk about balance, which I am not an expert on at all. He also brought up learning CW. Who knows CW, how we've learned it, how you'd like to learn it, would you like to learn it? things like that. And we've been talking to people about that. I mentioned when I was talking about the differences in how people learn. If you heard this part, that I had a cousin who was almost kind of damaged by a school system that changed the way they taught kids to read. And I was talking about the differences in how people learn. And John was talking about the country he grew up in stresses education to the point that they have a 100% literacy rate, which is great and amazing. And I wish we could do that here. So those are the three things that have come up so far. You can give us a new topic, head in a different direction, or comment on anything we've already spoken about. So Bob, KB2R5, how you doing tonight?
Hey, good evening, everyone. I've actually been listening for pretty much the whole thing. I was kind of breaking down my little portable setup I had. I was sitting out by the fire for a while tonight, and the wind was picking up, so wasn't really comfortable anymore. So I kind of breaking that down, and I missed the intro monologue, as you call this. So, but I've heard pretty much most everything. I've been sitting by side here. Yeah, balance. I've heard. Oh my word. I tell you, only had to do 3 wraps, about a 5-inch wrap, and then somebody said you have to do 8 wraps with a 12-inch wrap, and yeah, I got absolutely no clue. This is why I rely on you guys for all the science and technology stuff. As far as CW is concerned, I'm diehard the old school methodology of ham radio. I'm not really into the computer and having the computer decode CW for me. I think it's great, but I've been doing search and rescue for many years, and I practice a little bit on the I don't want to say prepper, but I guess along that lines. Zombie apocalypse or whatever. I'm kind of more of that mindset than the science technology. So for me, CW's hardcore original ham radio type stuff. So that definitely interests me. I definitely want to get involved. I heard about the Long Island CW Club a while ago, and definitely want to sign up and start maybe taking a few lessons here and there once I get the proper equipment. Let me draw for a moment. And so CW is definitely of interest to me. I'm definitely looking forward to learning it. It's going to be a whole new learning curve for me. As far as the education system and how different districts and regions do educate their kids, I served for a few years on the school board a while ago, and it was an eye opener. I don't know. I definitely hear both sides of the conversation you guys are talking about. It's definitely an eye opener, and I have my own 2 cents. But one wrong decision can impact somebody's life immensely. Especially this whole new. Man, I'm not even getting into it. That's a whole other topic, but anyway, yeah, definitely. I'm going to lean towards this CW. I'm definitely looking forward to learning some CW. So this is KD2RFI. Send it back to Dan.
All right, Bob. Cool. The more the merrier. And we need to get a ballot expert on here. Find out who in the club can come on one night. It would be a good Sunday night thing. And talk to us about balance. So, let's see where our second round brings us. But this is Neil on the Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I am W2NDG in Highland, New York, and I apologize if I sound a little off kilter tonight, but I kind of walked in here tonight from doing my shopping and my errands, and I got tied up because I've been running all over the place, picking up air conditioners, and there was some interesting stuff for sale all around this weekend. I don't know if anybody got out to any of the yard sales or garage sales this weekend, but I didn't as much. But there was definitely a lot of neat stuff out there to be had. So, all right, let's drop and see if there's anybody else wants to check in, and then we'll start round two. This is W2NDG. Do we have any more check-ins? Call sign and first name, please come now.
K2LD, Bob here.
Evening, Bob. Topics tonight so far have been balance, CW. Dave wanted to talk about balance, but we don't have a balance expert, and I think Dave checked out. But we'll try him again in a little bit. CW, and we did happen, because we were talking about how people learn CW, we had a little discussion on education and differences between American education and, in this case, education in, is it Norway, John? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm right. He didn't correct me. But yeah, definitely other countries have a much stricter and rigid education system than we do. And you can tell by their results. So anyway, any comments on those, Bob, or do you have another subject you'd like to talk about tonight, or something for another night that we can bring up?
Well, I didn't hear much of what went on before. Little comment of the education system here is that it's really gone downhill an awful lot. And I can tell because I have a daughter in middle school, and I look at her homework, and I kind of shake my head as far as what they're not learning and what they're being force-fed. And it's pitiful to see how bad our education system has been. So almost any other education system has got to be better, because the kids here are just not getting it. As far as CW goes, I would love to engage in that a little bit more. I kind of got the transmission part. I do not have the reception part. My ear is just not picking it up the way it should. But I would be a lot more apt to try it with friendly people that I know, rather than strangers across the country that are going to blow me away. So that would be interesting. One little drop. And one topic that I've never really got a good answer on, no matter how much I dig into it, I just can't find a really correct answer, is on coax electrical length. As far as if you're putting up an HF antenna, 100 feet isn't necessarily the proper way of going. I read somewhere, and I just can't figure out where it was, as far as depending on the frequency that you're going, that it should be a correct electrical length in distance as far as the coax goes. And I'm not sure if it has to be a half wave of it, or a quarter wave of it, or a multiple of those quarter waves. But if anybody has any information on that, that might be interesting, just not to lose any little power getting out the tip. And that's all I have.
Well, it's another subject I definitely wouldn't mind hearing some about myself. I know that with certain types of antennas, the length of the coax does matter. I think it's going to affect almost any antenna system to some extent, especially if you're introducing loss or other characteristics into the system. But I know for a fact there are certain types of wire antennas where they tell you that your lead-in has to be at least a certain length, or no more than a certain length, or things like that. There are situations where it's better to use 450 ohm ladder line as you lead in. There are other interesting ways of doing that as well, including just bare wire, run with insulators along the side of your house. I've seen that, and I don't understand why or when you would use something like that. So, be a good topic for a night, definitely. It's quite possible. Both you and Bob from Catskill, your observations on the American education system are, and I know Bob it doesn't want to get into it too deep. This is probably a conversation for the three of us and John over some coffee. My son, Alec, who we may have joining us some night when he gets his license, he graduated high school 10 years ago. So, although I have kids younger than him, stepkids, I wasn't really part of their high school education, as far as them coming home to me and me seeing their homework and helping them with it. I'm more involved with their lives after high school than I have been before that. So if things have changed that much in the last 10 years and they were already starting to deteriorate, then yeah, it's getting worse, and hopefully somebody can fix it. And obviously, it's not even really a political thing, because we've gone in each direction and nothing has fixed it yet. So I mentioned to John, I said, one of the things about education, and I said, I don't want to get into a political discussion tonight, but education has primarily been a very liberal-minded topic in this country. And whereas I tend to be a more middle-of-the-road person in my thoughts. I got cut off there. W2MDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Night. Net. I was saying that education in our country has always been a very liberal-minded and liberal-led thing, and I don't want to bring up a one side versus the other political conversation, but basically what I'm saying is that it's an institution that has usually leaned one way and not the other. And I think a lot of universal institutions, which education should be considered a universal idea and a universal institution, should not be a politically minded thing, and should pretty much run down the middle. And if politics are one of the things that's affecting that, and that's probably something that we do have to really do some self-searching on. I think it's a long time, unfortunately, before it gets fixed. But anyway, John, you definitely hit a subject that a lot of us have some passion about, and it's maybe we need that example from the education system you grew up in. And there's others that are good too, and there's others that have issues. So let me drop for a moment. I have a friend. It's actually a good friend of my older brother's, who moved to Europe and raised his family in Germany, and would always tell us about the education system there and how similar stories to what we hear from a lot of other countries. And it's a better educational system than what we have, but he had one issue with it, which was very early in school they started trying to disseminate which kids were going to go off to university and learn professions like the law and medicine and science and math, and which kids were going to go to vocational training and learn to be tradesmen. And he disagreed with that premise of trying to push kids in one direction or another at an early age. He felt that they should be more involved in that decision. That was his only complaint. and he had one kid who really, really, really wanted to go into medicine, and the school said, "No, you're not cut out for medicine. You're going to be, an electrician or a plumber or something like that." And he said, "But that's fine, but I don't want to do that." And they had to really fight to get him what he wanted, which I found really interesting. So there's another difference. It's going to be different everywhere we go, but yeah, we have things to fix here. I will yield to that. So let's pop back up to the top. I don't know if Dave is back from what he was doing, but we'll check real quick. K2JLV, are you still with us for round 2 on the Sunday Night Science and Technology Net? Okay, nothing heard. We did get a comment here on education from W2CRW, who I believe has a very close connection to it himself. He's talking about accountability, and that is one of the issues, that they're not holding teachers in many cases accountable for the results that they get. And they're not holding students accountable for succeeding or failing. And that's one of those jokes that, it's a phrase that I utter sometimes. People have heard me say it on here, is the everybody gets a trophy, that's not necessarily always a good thing. So the administrations, he says, are not accountable for producing a quality product. Yeah. Unfortunately, we could get into a topic of why that happens too, but I don't think we want to open that can of worms tonight. So he says the system is not tailored to foster students to do what they excel at. Yeah, and they try. At least they used to. Give us all those crazy standardized tests, tell us what we're good at. Anyway, let's go on to the next person on our round 2. Jim, KD2VAH. Any comments on anything that's come up so far, or you want to continue on something else? All right, we either put Jim to sleep or he bumped the tuning knob on his IC 7100 again. Jim, are you still there? All right, that's fine. We can check in with him again later, see if he's there. Matt, KB2GGF, any comments on what we brought up so far, or anything else you want to bring up?
Thanks, Neil. Matt, KB2GGF here in Kerhonkson. I sort of chuckled to myself when John was talking about in Finland that, mothers make sure their kids learn the ABCs. And mothers do that everywhere, of course. And my mom did that with me when I was a kid, only my mom was Canadian. So I was taught the letter Z as Z. And when I went to school, people would look at me. But now in ham radio, it is Z. So mom was right. The other thing, Bob, K2LD, was talking about coaxial length. And the only thing that I think I know about that is that with a dipole, your coax should be at least 1/4 wavelength long. It should be longer than 1/4 wavelength. Those are my 2 comments, but very interesting net tonight. And back to it, KB2GG.
All right, Matt, thanks a lot. And up next is John, K9JBT. John, I want to apologize to you because for some reason my brain always has trouble with Norway and Finland. And I don't know why. It's all the way back to when I was a kid. And I know they're 2 completely different places. maybe like somebody confusing the United States and Canada. So hope I didn't disrespect you by saying that, but I tend to I always like what I see in Scandinavia in general, and grew up with parents that always appreciated things from that part of the world. So it's a place I haven't visited yet, but I do want to, and hopefully someday it'll get me up there. So you pulled us in an interesting direction, and like I said, I haven't dealt directly with a school system here in 10 years or more. So it's quite possible that things have gotten worse. And from what I'm hearing from everybody else, maybe it's something I really need to start putting my head into and looking into again, because I'm eventually going to have grandkids in these systems. And that's coming up very soon. So, John, if you're still there, any other comments on anything we've brought up or any of that, please come down.
Oh yeah, this is K9JPT. Well, the Finns are a very stubborn people, so one of the things you can do to remind yourself about Finland is that we were the only country during World War II, along with Moscow and London, that wasn't occupied by a foreign occupational army. Only 3 capitals that were never occupied. But other than that, the thing is that with the educational system over there in Finland, you go to primary school, you have 2 to 3 teachers in a classroom. The extra 2 or 3 third teacher is meant to help bring students who are maybe slacking, bring them up to speed with the other students, which is a good thing. But a lot of the kids, even before they're 12 years old, are already going to trade school. And over there, trade schools are not viewed as a bad thing, because you need people in trade. You need people to know how to fix cars. You need people to know how to weld and build ships. Finland is known for its ship industry. You've seen the Love Boat. That ship was built in Finland. In Miami, Ecstasy, Fantasy, those were all ships built in Finland. These required tradespeople, and this is what they capitalize on. Let me jump for a second here. So here you might be taught that going to trade school like BOCES is a bad thing, but over there it's not looked at it that way. As far as going to the university, students that go to the university have to pass an entrance exam. So if you're in high school and you're doing well, there shouldn't really be no reason why you don't get in. But some of the colleges there are very competitive, and some get in, some don't. And if you don't get in, some usually take a job and then try again the second year after they graduate. So I mean, that's the way it is over there. Here, I was supposed to go to Arlington. I didn't go to Arlington because I decided, along with my dad, that I'm going to go to a military school, and that's what I did. So I had, I think, a very much more better education. I don't think education takes you too far when you ask people who don't have children, who are senior citizens, to ask them to pay money in a system that they have no control over. It is very political. This is a very, very political conversation, because you have no control over the money that's being taken from your back pocket. It's much better for parents who have children and have a vested interest in the educational system for them to pay themselves, instead of relying on other people to help fund projects and things that really go nowhere. And that's how I feel about it. Back to that, K9JPT.
Well, good stuff, John. And trust me, I would never want to imply that, picking a trade over a degreed let's say, profession like medicine or science, that one is better than the other. Always encouraged my children that if they wanted to learn a trade, that we would be just as proud of them as they would if they did anything else. To me, it never really mattered. Considered several of them myself, and what I ended up doing, I didn't go to school for. This is, we all end up somewhere, and I guess the best way to put this, and I've told all of my kids this, and I tell other people this: everybody is good at something. The trick is to figure out what it is. And sometimes there's more than one thing that fit that, but this is where we end up. I wasn't implying maybe that they felt that learning a trade was like a penalty. The way my friend brought it to me, though, was that they were already trying to disseminate the kids at a very early age who they felt were better for a trade as opposed to a profession. And he thought that they should be able to make that change if they wanted to. And it was very difficult for them to do that. It is a problem here that sometimes trades are put below professions on some sort of scale. And one of the things that can cause, especially if we start pushing more and more for access to that higher level education without addressing our trade schools, let me drop, because we need to be pouring the same amount of money into that part of our education as well. We're not going to have skilled labor, and that's a huge issue. We need people to build the society, the physical part of it, that we're all occupying and becoming a part of. Everything is changing. Technology is changing everything. One of the things that we've mentioned before, and didn't come up last week when we were talking about quantum technology, but someone brought it up, I think, in the chat, is there's a word that you'll hear very often, which is the singularity. And what that refers to is where technology gets to a point where it starts to alter our lives drastically. And everything needs to keep up with this, and everything is being affected by it. And we need to value all levels of education. So, great topic, something we can continue on another night probably too. All right. John, let me throw it back to you for any closing comments here, because we're probably not going to do a third round.
No, I mean, there's really, from my part, no closing comments. I mean, when you're paying this kind of money to a school district and you're keeping your eye out on these young kids that are, taking jobs behind cashiers, whether it's in a food store like ShopRite or a McDonald's, they're not very smart. And some of them are seniors. I just had an interaction at a Dairy Queen where I wanted to have a sandwich. And I asked the girl, do I really have to have this combo? Have the sandwich. I asked her, how much is the sandwich? She said $9.97. I said, how on earth can the sandwich be $9.97 when the combo is $8.23? And right next door is the McDonald's. And this is the McDonald's there in Suffern, in Port Jervis. So I go there, order 2 Big Macs. They had a special, you get an extra one for $1. So the bill came to $6.20 something. Get to the window, and the guy says 17. I said, my order is not 17. Yeah, it is. I said, no, it's not. I said, I only have 2 Big Macs. He looks at his machine. Oh, I just sold your order to the other lady who got all the other stuff, her much more. So they didn't know how to even operate their machine to clear everything. So it was just easier for them to give me the 2 Big Macs for free so that they could start all over again. I mean, it's not really impressive when you're dealing with people who don't know what they're supposed to be doing. It's really, really sad. And if we have a really good educational system, how come we're not thumping our chests and hearing these nationwide awards that Arlington School District is winning and things, how educated people are. Because we're not. They're just going in your back pocket and taking your money. So that's my closing comment. Back to Nick from K9 JPT.
All right, John. And it's definitely definitely one view of everything. And whereas you've brought me to the point where, yes, I agree that there's a major problem and everything else. But keep in mind and remember, that's not the experience you'll have everywhere. Thank God, But yeah, I've also been amazed at some of the people that we have managed to bring all the way through 12 years of education and put out into the world, and they're really not able to function. How does that happen? All right. Well, thanks, John. Tom, into FCC in Fishkill. Are you still with us, and anything you want to add? All right, not sure if Tom is still with us. Let's throw back, just because we skipped Jim earlier, see if Jim came back. KD2VAH, are you still around? And any comments or continuations on anything?
Yeah, I'm still here, KD2VAH. And I agree with the other gentleman, okay, because I pay even a hair more of those taxes he's talking about for Arlington, and none of my children use those schools. I send them both to private schools. Yeah, I understand his frustration, but I guess it's like the old saying, death and taxes, two things we can't get out of. But if he finds a way to get us out of them, I'm all for it. I believe he'd have a long list of us all for it. But otherwise, no. I've been listening to everything. I had to run upstairs and grab coffee for a second, but I'd been listening to everything. It was a good net tonight. I like it. I like when it kind of like jumps subjects on and like keeps you, you get a little bored of one subject and then the next thing you know, you floated into another. I like that. Back to net.
All right, Jim. And, education is directly related to what this net is about, really, in a lot of respects. I think it was Bob from Catskill mentioned that he was on his school board. And I'll mention this to John and everybody else and myself. One of the ways that we can try to affect change is by getting involved. You don't have to have kids in the school district to get involved in the school district. Show up to a meeting or two, ask questions, run for school board position. There's definitely a lot of things you can do. And in some cases, you might even be able to get involved in the education itself. There's things you can do. Chris, W2CRW, has been continuing to throw up some comments in the YouTube chat here. He was saying that college education should come along with associated field experience, especially with engineers. And why do we just do this for medicine? Why do we, make just people in medicine, do their residencies or internships? I see it in the scientific research where I am, where we have postdoctoral candidates and postdocs, and they work in the labs and sometimes become principal investigators themselves. But we don't do this for everything. I think it's definitely a lead-in from somebody speaking from experience. Chris is out there training people to do things. He has been teaching electricians, and he's definitely speaking along the lines that I think some of these professions and careers really need to listen to. He also said better career counseling would help people head into productive positions that they can enjoy and excel. And we need to find better ways to poke at the kids and determine what they're going to enjoy doing and what they're good at. I got steered in a decent direction as a high school student. Let me drop. I thought about all the different things that I liked and all the different things that I liked reading about and enjoyed doing. And I started asking questions. What does somebody who does X need to learn? What part of science is that? And one of the things that I was fascinated by at the time was that acoustical engineering was a big part of automotive science. And it was showing up in two different places in automotive science. Making cars quiet, which, God, there's a whole technology involved in that now, including electronics and computer processing, and engineering car suspensions to react in a predictable, safe, and pleasant manner, depending on what you're using your car for, obviously. But that is also acoustics, the science of waves and vibration and resonance. So I chose that. And there's any number of reasons why I didn't continue in that direction, but I made up my mind. I think I was a junior in high school when I probably a sophomore, and said I wanted to go to school for physics. I wanted to get a degree in acoustical engineering, and I wanted to work for the automotive industry, either making cars quiet or making the suspensions work better. I didn't do it, but I definitely got led in a direction that I think I probably would have enjoyed. Like I said, I won't get into the reasons why I didn't. I'll probably always have to wonder why. One more drop. Also, for those of us of a certain age, there's no reason why you can't go back. I did it. I passed up on a bachelor's degree as a 20-something and got it as a 50-something. And I really enjoyed it. So anyway, let's see if Tom from Fishkill is there again real quick. N2FCC, are you still around, or did we lose you for the night?
2FCC. Yeah, speaking of education, I think and when you have a lot more hands-on, there's a lot of sitting in the classroom learning. What I'll say is theory, but I think they got to get more hands-on. And there was probably still is a push for college, and a lot to be said for vocational. Plumbers, electricians make a ton of money, and you don't need necessarily a 4-year or 6-year degree for that. But yeah, more practical stuff. Computer programming, to make robots, and little wheeled robots. I think that fascinates people and it keeps people engaged. So more hands-on to increase the education. And then to FCC back to that.
Good stuff, Tom. I agree with everything. I here's something. You have a local school district that you want to, do something for. And yes, we're all paying money into the school districts if we're homeowners. Go to the district, go to your high school, go to your junior high, whichever it is, find out if they have a robotics club or a makers club or something along those lines. Talk to the advisor, talk to the students that are really involved, and find out if they would really like you to come in and talk about what we do someday. Talk about how electronics and digital processing and automation and everything else has affected our hobby. And you might be surprised that some of them might be interested in applying some of the knowledge that they've learned and getting involved in amateur radio. Or it could just go completely in the other direction, and you'll enjoy the technology that they're working with and start getting involved in that. A lot of us do like to tinker with things other than radio. So, but there's something else that's out there that we can do. Right now, it's not something I have time for, but I certainly would love to do something with the schools. I know I'm going to stick my head into the school district here, only because, like everybody else, or a lot of people have brought up here, I'm supporting the school with my own taxes. So I'd like to see what they're doing with my money. I'd like to learn. I may not, get involved politically with the school, but I wouldn't mind getting involved, at least, like I said, going to a meeting and asking questions, finding out what they do here. And oh God, I hope it's, I think I've heard over the years that sometimes when you do this, they'll look at you and say, well, you don't have any kids in the school. Why do you care? Just try to ask me that question. Bob from Catskill, KD2RFI. Any further comments on everything tonight? And something tells me, over a cup of coffee, I'd get a lot out of you. Not necessarily on the radio.
KD2RFI. Yeah, you get a lot out of me. I know we talked earlier, Neil, and I think I even mentioned I raised my own kids. I had custody of them. Between me and the ex, there was 2 different trains of thought on the education of our children. One thought was, well, send them to the school; they'll figure it out there. All right, and it was that simple. I wish it was that simple. It takes a village. It really does. So I'm listening to everything, and I'm hearing some good points and things I don't agree with, and but there's a lot of good information. All those people are talking. There is no one size fits all for our education system at all. My kids were going through the elementary years. I PTA dad. I take time off work. I do everything I can to be as involved with my kids as possible. And it was a great experience. I made a lot of good friends there, and some people I'm still really good friends with. But also a lot of people, once I took the school board position, and it's not in Catskill School District, so it was a Ulster County district. But once I took the school board position, the thoughts changed, especially when I hit the high school. And, politics were involved in the high school, so it was directly into my children specifically. We had a lot of meetings and a lot of talks, and a lot of interesting topics came up, and I saw a wide change of attitudes. I think the biggest thing is we can't judge a couple of bad apples and decide we got to cut the tree down. It's overall, I think there's a lot of people trying to do the right thing, and like anything else in this political climate right now, don't really know what the right thing is. But I learned a lot. I absolutely learned a lot, and I agree with you 100%. You got to get involved. You got to jump in, and you really got to get to know what's going on. Let me let it drop for a moment. But if you're not involved and you're not hands-on with the experience, you really won't know what's going on. So it's tough. It's tough. It's a lot of work and a lot of dedication. It's interesting. And you may find some things that totally disgust you, but I got to say, overall, it was a wonderful experience for me for all I've done over the years. So for the sake of my kids and everyone else, I just kind of backed out of it. Like I said, it was a couple bad apples bringing it right at my doorstep, which is fine. Listen, I've grown up, and I was one of those kids in school always fighting, and I'm not afraid to fight today for what's right. So, not a big deal. But I'm just trying to get my kids through the education system. Is it the best? No, I don't think so. Could there be improvements? Absolutely. But like I said, it takes a village. If one side or the other side is not willing to do their part, then it's never going to succeed 100%. So as far as the trade schools, I think it's wonderful. I've always always told all my kids, I don't care if they decide to flip burgers at McDonald's, but they better be the best burger flipper ever. You know, never stop learning, never stop trying to improve, and never stop looking and taking advice from others. You know, no matter what you decide to do with your life, you strive to be the absolute best that you can be. You know, and if that happens to be the best in the world, it's the best in the world. If it's only the best you can do, it's the best you can do. But, you know, never stop learning. Always keep pushing. I think I'll leave it there tonight and wish everyone 7-3. I do got to get up early in the morning and then take on my day job. But is the education system good, bad, and different? I think it's just really different. Times are changing, attitudes are changing, and we're changing. So as long as we keep striving to keep improving and keep building and keep making it better, I don't see where it can really go wrong. But again, one size doesn't fit all. You guys have a good night. KD2 RFI. I'm clear.
Well, thanks, Bob, and have a good night. And yeah, Bob and I were having a long talk earlier about our kids. You know, and they're all different. They're all going to get different things out of the district and out of the system. There's several things that I see going in the wrong direction sometimes. One of the things that Bob brought up was, you know, pruning the tree for only a couple of bad apples. That's a very good point. Because of everything we've said, you know, that not everybody learns and not everybody has the same values when it comes to looking at their education. And, you know, we're going to lose some people. There will always be one or two that fall through the cracks. The trick is to get them the correct help and find out how to motivate them to push them into the right direction. But because everybody learns differently, and a lot of people learn at different speeds, especially when we're very young, recognizing that and dealing with people on that individual level, I think is necessary. You know, one of the things that John brought up was the, you know, more than one teacher in a class. And I have to say, when I look back, let me drop. Some of the best education that I got in grade school and elementary school was the classes that had multiple teachers. And they each managed to fall into their own expertise. And you find yourself sometimes relating to one better than the other. Sometimes it was the subjects they taught. Sometimes it was the way they taught. And now, I saw this with my own kids when I started, you know, paying attention and seeing what was going on with them. My daughter, I remember, who seemed to learn very quickly. She had a couple of teachers in a row in elementary school that challenged her. The teacher will recognize sometimes that a kid needs a little more to try to keep them busy. And I was like, well, this is great. This is how it should work. But then she had a couple of years where she had a teacher that was basically, nope, they all need to do the same thing. And if she's bored, well, that's her problem, not mine. Took the kids out of school for a week to go away one time, and I asked her teacher, well, we had the 3 kids at the time, and I asked for all 3 of them to get the work that they were supposed to do that week in advance so that I could try to help them while we were away, at least cover some of the subjects that they should have been learning. Let me drop. I think my son at the time was only in kindergarten. But I still got a whole list of what they were going to be working on. My oldest was given a whole bunch of assignments and some books and things, and she had to cover that. But at the time, and this is before I have the other 3 stepchildren, my middle daughter, her teacher gave me, like, you know, oh, we're going to be doing this, this, and this, and she's fine. She'll catch right up. She doesn't need to do anything. And it just really floored me. So they're all different. I don't mean the kids, I mean the teachers. All right. Last but not least, Bob, K2LD, you still with us? And anything else you want to say tonight?
No, I'm just listening. It's definitely interesting topics, no two ways about it. Just continuing on the trend of what they're teaching now and how dumbed down they're trying to make people. I had a recent experience. I hate to say it, but in my store, we have Seagram's coolers. They're marked in a little display at $1 each. Some genius decided to put them on sale, 10 for $10. I went and walked in and I saw that. I said, "Well, that's pretty bright." And jokingly, I asked the cashier, "How much would 5 be?" And they said, "I don't know. You'd have to bring it here. I'd ring it up for you."
You know, I related a little story from my own days in retail. My father could do complex math in his head, more than I can do. But he taught me a lot of the methods he used for figuring out things. And I can do a lot of it. I really can. And once again, all of our brains are different. Not everybody does this the same way. But I did figure out how to do some of it. But the joke was, from my days in retail, the minute I touch a cash register, all of that goes out of my head. And usually it manifested itself in, somebody giving me, $10 for an $8.88, charge. And then I've already rung it into the register, and all of a sudden they hand me 33 cents. And my brain is like, wait, what do I do with this? I can recover from it. I mean, I just came up with those numbers right off the top of my head. But it was just funny is that my brain would work completely differently if I punched that money into the register and was waiting for it to tell me. And unfortunately, you have to do it that way because they want to reconcile. And if there's a mistake, they want to know, what you did and so what have you. But yeah, I've seen enough of that myself. And it's unfortunate. That's different than the story I told, obviously. But all right, thanks, Bob. And I'm familiar with many of the districts in the area, having done things for this and for that, knowing other parents in other districts. And I think you're in one that I really don't know very well. I know one teacher up there, and I don't even think she's a teacher up there anymore. But I never really knew much about where you are. That's probably not where you raised your kids, though. I forget when you moved up here, but you're still supporting a local school district, like we were saying before. So anyway, let's see if there's any last-minute check-ins, but we're going to be closing out the net after this. So this is W2NDG on the Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Is anybody who'd like to check in before we close things up here? Please come now with your call sign and your first name.
Pete, into MCI, Kingston, New York.
And there's Pete, who is paying taxes into the system that graduated me. So Kingston was definitely an interesting school district to grow up in just because of the size of it. And there's a couple others around here that are pretty big, but it's one of the larger ones. All right. So, Pete, we've been talking about education, but we also did talk briefly about CW and learning CW and how people learn CW. And earlier, Dave wanted to learn about or hear more about balance, but we don't have a balance expert. So I think we're going to do that another night if we can get somebody in to talk about balance. So any last comments here before I close out the net tonight?
Yeah, I've been listening the past hour or so. I've been doing some work around the house, getting stuff ready for tomorrow, work and stuff like that. Learning CW, I never learned it that way. I never learned CW, but one of the methods that I really wanted to try in my Elmer when I was a kid is his son and my brother were high school friends, and the way he learned it was they recorded CW. One left channel would be the tone, and right after the tone, say was the E. Wait a second, and say E in the right thing. So you listen to it, so you would hear the tone and the letter, the tone and the letter, and then once you get good, you just turn the letter off, and you would remember, oh, that's what that's from. And if you ever listen to a mixtape a lot, and you know the next song that's coming up, that's the same kind of thing that goes through there. The other thing we talked about filters, why you want them, mostly for fatigue factor. If you had to listen to multiple CW conversations and couldn't filter things out, you could do it. It'd be like talking in a room with people and trying to talk to somebody, in a crowded room. You could do it, but it gets tiring after a while. So that was that. And I think Bob mentioned something about coaxial length. I'm assuming he means the velocity factor. That's why there's an electrical length and then there's a physical length. Bob, was that what you were commenting about?
It's what I would want to know more about.
Okay, well, just like there's a real length for antennas and there's a theoretical length, and there's theoretical and reality. And so this RF doesn't travel in coax at as it would in space or in theory. The coaxial slows it down a little bit, so it's called a velocity factor. It usually ranges from 0.66 to 0.998 or 96 in the 9 somewhere in that area. And you can look that up for each coax. And so to calculate the electrical length, you would multiply physical length times the velocity factor, and that would give you the thing, or divide by it. That's what you wanted to find out, what the actual electrical length is. So that's how that works. And it's really important, like if you have phasing, like if you want to phase something at a quarter wave or a half wave phasing line, you need to have the electrical length. You can't have a physical length because it's not right. So that's why there's an electrical length and there's a physical length. If that makes sense. Some of the new analyzers actually you can put it on there, it'll tell you what the length is.
Pete, thanks for clearing that up. I completely missed, I guess, what Bob was looking to find out, but that's cool. I like the CW method there. It's an interesting way to look at it. As far as listening with filters, I think someone like Howard, like I said, from the LICW group, is one of those people that can listen to multiple things for longer than the rest of us can. I know people like that, and they can concentrate on more than one thing at a time. It's a skill that I think you have to have if you're going to do CW without the ability to filter it down to one or two. So, all right. Bob, do you have any questions direct for Pete there for what he was talking about? And thank you again, Pete, for clarifying.
No, not directly, but it could certainly be a topic for another night when you are discussing more the setup of HF antennas, especially that there's so many new generals coming on that it might be an interesting thing as far as the correct lengths that things should be to provide a minimal loss.
All right, it's definitely something to think about and something to talk about. So it's at least with the way we've been doing things, it's more of like a Thursday night topic for Dave's Net. But I have no problem doing it here as well. So, but we can have a further discussion on that and see. Maybe we want to do that and balance one night. And you're right, Bob. We have a lot of people who would benefit from that who are coming on with HF activities. So, all right. I want to thank everybody who checked in tonight and everybody who made this a nice, lively conversation. And I appreciate the topics tonight. That was great. I will give another quick plug for the LICW people again, though. Membership of the group is pretty cheap. I think if you just Google Long Island CW Club, you'll find their stuff. They do have some pretty good teaching methods, but the group offers quite a bit, and like I said, they're doing something right with the number of members they have now. They'll probably be up to 2,000 at some point this year. So that's just insane when you think about it. There are no amateur radio clubs other than the league itself that get that large. It doesn't happen very often. So cool stuff. Let me drop. This is W2NDG on the Sunday night OMARC, Science and Technology Net. I think we'll close things up here. If anybody has anything else they want to discuss after we close the net, that's fine. I usually hang out for 5 or 10 minutes and we can have casual discussions. Let me close out things with the things we're supposed to talk about. Let me drop again. As I mentioned, this net and this repeater are sponsored by the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club, or OMARC. You do not need to be a member to participate in any of the OMARC on-the-air activities. We run 4 nets during the week. 2 of them are daily nets. Every morning at 8:35 a.m., Paul, ACTUQ, also accompanied by Rob, W2RWS, and Jed. And Jed is KD2KJU. I remembered it tonight. Host what we call the 8:35 on the 8:05. Every morning at 8:35, hams come on, talk about what they're going to do for the day, what they did the previous night, how they're feeling, what's going on in their lives. This started at the beginning of COVID, a need to be social. Ham radio is a social hobby. We are social creatures, as Paul frequently says on his net. And it was a way for us to continue that social activity as hams when we couldn't get together. It's a great casual net done in a roundtable fashion, and that's every morning at 8:35 on this repeater. Every evening at 6:30, a rotating group of hosts host the 6:30 OMARC check-in net. Similar to the 8:35 net, we're checking on each other. We're checking on ourselves. What did you do? How was your day? Are you okay? Do you have any questions? Are there any things that you need help with? That's what the net is for. We're here as a community to help each other and to be friends with each other. And the 6:30 net, directed net, is all about that. Every Thursday night at 8 o'clock, I believe, Dave, K2JLV, hosts the Thursday night technical net. Usually a ham radio related subject, but not always. Dave usually has a topic he's thought of before he starts the net, but on the first round he asks people if there's something specific that they need help with or they had a question about. And sometimes that net goes in interesting directions. But it is more of a technical net with respect to radio. Every Sunday night, right here, I host this Science and Technology net, usually with Jim, K2BHM. And Jim has been away, and we're looking forward to have him come back in June and join us with the nets again. We are not holding this net just to radio-related topics. Science and technology is a pretty broad thing, and we've definitely hit some pretty broad topics, especially tonight. So all of these nets, like I said, you don't have to be a member of the club, but we encourage you to join if you're not. And you can find out information about the club and how to join by going to omarcclub.com. omarcclub.org. That's it for me, W2NDG, on the Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We will close the formal part of the net, and like I said, I'll have the radio on for a little while longer if anybody has any other questions or wants to continue a casual conversation. The formal part of the net is now closed. Everybody have a good night. I am ending the YouTube stream now.
W2NDG.